As Michelle said, I'm Jim. Bill was my friend. I met Bill, as probably many of us did, right here in this church, back in the nave, when we would walk in for Mass, and Bill was always there with his smiling face and a hand outstretched. And that was probably about 1996 when Claire and I, my wife and I, first started coming here. And then in 2008, we moved here permanently, and Bill was still there with his smiling face. I never really put together that Dorothy up here at the organ and Bill back there were really a couple. And as she's had to do so many times in my life, Claire explained that to me. And it was sometime after that that I noticed that Bill was becoming a little less understanding of what was going on. And Michelle Ryan explained to me that indeed he was suffering from the early effects of Alzheimer's. And that Dorothy was in need of a little help. And so I talked to Dorothy and I said, I'd be happy to come over and visit with Bill. And so that was the beginning of our friendship. Michelle already explained Bill's history, so I won't go through all of that. But Bill and I spent a lot of time together, and he told me the story of when he was in the Navy. He explained how these mines would go off behind the minesweeper, create this huge explosion. And he said all the young guys would get all upset on board ship. So I would settle them down. Bill was about 19 years old. He was the old man. They moved to the North Woods after a Navy career and some time in Chicago. And Bill did a lot of different things that Michelle mentioned. But in my time with Bill, I learned something about Bill Grems that I'll bet almost nobody else in this church knows. You know he was a handyman, he fixed saws, all that stuff. But I'll bet you did not know that Bill Grems was a world explorer. He explored the world. You thought he stayed right here for little Land Lakes. He went all over. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Bill and I used to take rides. Sometimes at night after the sun went down, Bill would get a little anxious, and so I would go over. We'd go for rides, and we would just go down the road. And I was fairly new around here, but Bill would say, I think I've been down that road. So I'd say, okay, so we would go down that road. Sometimes it was kind of late at night and it was dark and I didn't have a clue where I was. And we would just drive along, and sooner or later we would pop out someplace that either he recognized or I recognized. And I would say, you know, Bill, I never would have found my way out of here by myself. I'm glad you're my friend. I traveled a lot of roads I never would have gone down if it hadn't been for Bill. We took a lot of trips to the hardware store, Ace Hardware and Menards. We would walk up and down the aisles, and Bill would take stuff off the rack, and he would explain to me what this thing was for. And sometimes he would take something off the rack and say, what the hell is this for? And I would say, I don't know. And one time, I needed a GFI receptacle, and I said, Bill, we got to go to the store and get me a GFI receptacle. So we walked up and down the aisles. And you know, and this is a true story, Bill Grems, in the depths of his Alzheimer's, found that receptacle for me. And he said, this is what you need. And I said, thanks, Bill. I would have never found it without you. You're my friend. Well, we already heard that Bill was attracted to pretty women. His wife married Dorothy. He told me that many times. One day, in the throes of last winter, Dorothy called me and said, Bill needs to go and have an MRI tomorrow. Can you take him? And I said, sure. So I went in. It was at Milestone at the time. We had lunch. Bill wasn't feeling real great that day. And I tried to talk him into going. He really didn't want to go, but finally he agreed. So he got his coat on, got my truck out front, and the doors of Milestone opened, and that 10 below colder than hell air hit Bill. And he said, "Oh my God, I'm not going out there." And I said, "Well, come on, Bill, you got to go." So we got him in my truck, and we got him to the hospital, and I thought, oh boy, you know how long it takes in the hospital. I mean, it's forever before you get in. Well, I went in, I explained to the lady, well, could you really speed this up? She said, "I'll try." So I sat down with Bill. A minute or two went by only, and this beautiful, curly-haired young woman came around the bed. And she said, "Bill Grems?" Well, Bill got the biggest smile on his face. And I don't think an MRI ever went any smoother ever. And I mean, that's a true story. I'm not making that up. He was so happy. Bill and I would have lunch together at Milestone. And that was always a great affair. We always had a good time with the other folks there. And then afterwards, we would try to find something to do. Sometimes we'd go for a ride, get a Sunday, or we would walk around. But one day I picked up the National Geographic, and I came and brought that to Milestone with me. And we went back to his room after lunch, and we sat down on the couch, and I took it out, and I opened it up to a spread about birds' paradise. Maybe some of you saw that spread earlier this year. And I said, "Boy, look at these birds, Bill." And then we opened up to a double page, and there was an aerial photograph of the jungle that these birds lived in. And that's when I found out that Bill Grems was a world explorer. He said, "I've been there." He said, "I went all the way from here, and I went through that jungle, and I went up here, and I came down here, and I walked all the way around there, and I came out over here." And he said, "You know all those birds we saw on the page before?" He said, "I saw every one of those birds." And he said, "It was hot. It was really hot. There were bugs." He said, it was really something. He was convinced, and so am I, that Bill was there. The next time I came, I brought another one, and it was about the Arctic. There were musk oxen and wolves, and he told me how he walked across the tundra and how you needed to stay away from those musk oxen because they were really mean. And those wolves, you didn't want to mess with those. And he told me how cold it was. One time he even took me on a cruise down the Danube River in Europe. And he pointed out all the houses and the churches. And I said, "You know, Bill, I never would have known any of that if you weren't my friend." You know, I have to say this, that through all of these years, and through all of Bill's troubles, and all the places that he stayed, there's one person who made sure that Bill got the best treatment that could possibly be given. And if you ever want an advocate about anything, you ask Dorothy Grems. She made sure that Bill was taken care of, the very best that he could be. And when something was wrong, she brought it forth. And I know that one day, many years from now, when we're all in heaven, Dorothy's going to talk and check in with Bill. And I can guarantee you that if everything wasn't perfect, God is going to hear about it. I know that's going to happen. The last Sunday that I saw Bill was May 18th. I went to Rhinelander and walked into his room at Friendly Village and sat on his bed, and he woke up, he said hello, and I think he recognized me. We chatted for a while. After a while I asked him if he wanted to sit up. He said that'd be okay. So I helped him sit up on the side of his bed, and I sat next to him and put my arm around him. And he said, "Would it be okay if I rested my head on your shoulder?" And I said, "Of course it would, Bill." And I sat there with him for a long time. And I said, "You know, Bill, you are my very good friend." And he said, I know I am your friend." Well, I left that day not knowing that that would be the last time I would see Bill for a while. And then on Friday morning, it was about 2:30 in the morning, I had slept more soundly than I had ever slept in a long time. And I woke up to get something to drink, and I noticed that my phone message was lit up. And there was a message from Dorothy at 12:42 a.m. that Friday, telling me that she had just gotten a call that Bill was dying and she had to go to Rhinelander. I had slept completely through that phone call. By this time it was almost 3, so I called her on my cell phone. She told me that Bill had died. We cried together. Then I spoke to Larry. Larry, you were the voice of calm that I needed then. Thank you. Thank you. And then I did what I often do when something difficult happens. And I went to the Word. And I used this little book that I use all the time. It's called Give Us This Day. It has the readings for all the days of the year. And this was the reading for Friday, May 23rd, the day that Bill died. It says, faithful friends are a sturdy shelter. Whoever finds one finds a treasure. Faithful friends are beyond price. No amount can balance their worth. Faithful friends are life-saving medicine. Those who fear God will find them. Those who fear the Lord enjoy stable friendship, for as they are, so will their neighbors be. Well, I just have to say thank you, Dorothy. Thank you, David, Alicia, and Larry, for sharing your husband and your father with me. Thank you. For allowing Bill Grems to be my friend.